Hi, everyone. This week we will be discussing advocating for social change. So, when we think about how social policy gets determined and changed, there's essentially three main ways if we think about the different levels of government that we have. The first is through legislative action. So, this can be both at the state and the federal level. This is where a law gets put into place. So, our Congress or our legislature will pass a specific legislative action. So if we think about rights for individuals based on sexual orientation, there has been a number of legislative actions that have been conducted. For example, one of the earlier ones was in 1996 with the Defense of Marriage Act, which which allowed states to not recognize same-sex marriages. However, since then, there has been a number of executive orders and judicial decisions which has ruled that unconstitutional. When we think about executive orders, these are presented either by the president for the entire country or the governor for a specific state. And it says that for the time being, while I am in charge, this is going to be the law. When that individual leaves office, that executive order is no longer going to be in place. So specifically related to laws surrounding sexual orientation. In Kansas a few years ago, Governor Kelly banned discrimination based on sexual orientation in public jobs. It was not passed by legislature, and it did not protect private sector jobs. So it only protected jobs within the control of the government. There's also been a number of judicial decisions. So this is what comes down from different courts. So sometimes it's state courts, federal courts, civil courts. The highest Supreme Court is the one that kind of rules over the entire United States. And most recently, the Supreme Court ruled this past summer that employment-based discrimination because of sexual orientation is illegal. It also, several years ago, struck down the Defense of Marriage Act, which essentially made civil unions between same-sex couples legal, and they had to be recognized by all states. So we see when we think about social policy, there's various ways that we can interact with policymakers to make a change. So there's different advocacy efforts that we can engage in. So advocating is supporting a cause, speaking up for something that you believe in, and there's different ways that we can advocate for a specific cause. And specifically when we think about social policy, there's different ways that we can help pursue our agenda. So direct action campaigns are direct steps that individuals are taking to make their case known. This might be a letter writing campaign where lots of individuals write letters or emails or make phone calls to policymakers. Sometimes we see tweet out a specific thing before a case is going to be ruled on in Congress. You can set up in-person meetings, town halls, large gatherings to pull people together and let them know about a specific issue. There's personal testimony where you might go and actually talk to Congress and let individuals understand your cause and how it's going to affect you in particular. You can write letters to the editor, which is in newspapers. You can write policy briefs, which are, you'll do more if you take social policy, and you'll actually write a policy brief, and this is roughly 5 pages that summarizes a specific law and how you want to change it. The purpose of direct action campaigns is to let your elected officials know. It's a direct action to say, this is how I feel about an issue, and this is how a large group of people feel about a certain issue. You are expressing support for a specific law or to change a specific law. And it, especially when it comes to personal testimony, it just lets people know how you directly are going to be impacted, because a lot of laws, legislatures aren't directly impacted by them. So they want to hear from their constituents who are directly impacted by them. So for example, if there is going to be a law surrounding cuts to disability benefits. If you have a disability, you might talk in front of Congress, or you might write a letter explaining how cutting your disability benefits would be negatively impacted for you. There's also petitions. So I'm sure most of us have signed a petition at one point in time or another, but this is where you collect signatures from people to support a certain issue. So it might be, sometimes you need petitions to get candidates on the ballot, or to recall a candidate, or to simply display your support for a specific piece of legislation. In some states, they have what's called ballot initiatives, where if you garner so many signatures, you can get something actually voted. You can actually get it on the election ballot. Kansas does not have ballot initiatives. Others, about half of the other states in the country do. Change.org is a large petition platform. The main question with petitions is, do they work? We've all probably signed a number of petitions over time, and they don't make immediate change. However, they're a way of showing your support for an issue. If 1 million people sign a petition, it draws attention to one issue in particular, where policymakers have no choice but to start to listen if there's that much support surrounding a specific issue. So it helps. It's just one additional way to raise awareness about an issue. There's also public demonstrations, which again is another opportunity to raise awareness of issues. This is where people are actually coming together at a specific time and place to draw awareness to a specific issue. So there's been like the civil rights marches, parades, the Women's March. There's picketing that we might see, especially around unions. Unions do various picketing to support the use of labor unions. You might have protest, or where you boycott a specific issue. If you strike, so like teacher strikes where teachers don't report to their jobs. We've seen sit-ins. So a lot of these public demonstrations were used very widely in the civil rights era. They had sit-ins on buses. They had sit-ins at countertops to kind of recognize that this is an issue and we're not leaving until this issue gets addressed. So public demonstrations are, again, they're really helpful to draw attention to a specific issue and engage other people in this. So this is, again, another way to help demonstrate that, hey, there's a lot of people who care about this issue, and how can we get other people fired up about it? And we can do that through different public demonstrations to call attention. And then from a public demonstration, you are more than likely using another advocacy effort, such as direct action campaigns where you're writing letters. So all of these things are kind of being used in conjunction with one another. One thing in and of itself isn't going to be successful, especially if you think about the civil rights movement. There were multiple things that they were doing. They weren't simply having boycotts and marches. They were also behind the scenes talking to legislatures. There's also legal action. So legal action, we talked about, when there's court cases in the Supreme Court or state courts are ruling on certain things. So this is where you might have a lawsuit to change a certain policy, or you might have a lawsuit to stop something from being implemented. For example, President Trump had a number of executive orders surrounding immigrants, and there were lots of legal actions that were taken to prevent those executive orders from being implemented. Legal action is typically the last resort. Okay, so this is one of your lecture quiz questions for this week. Legal action is typically the last resort compared to the other above advocacy efforts, and that's because it's very expensive and it takes a lot of time. Legal action can drag on for years and be very expensive if you think about all the lawyer fees that you're paying. So that's why it tends to be the last resort that people try. But again, you're doing all of these in conjunction with one another. So it might be that you start the legal action process while you're trying to build awareness about a certain issue. But it is typically more time consuming and more expensive compared to some of the other options. So when you are trying to change a social policy, different challenges that you might be presented with is, really considering, how should I advocate in this situation? And is the context going to allow me to advocate? Is this something that is going to be receptive to the community? If you are trying to change, let's think about class from a few weeks ago when we talked about banning the box. So the idea of kind of removing felony conviction questions from job applications. Is that something you're going to have a march over, banning the box? Probably not. It's not this issue that is going to draw out large amounts of people. It might be that you need to take legal action, or you use public testimony and people who have actually had an issue with being discriminated against because of a felony conviction. So you have to really decide where your focus is going to be and how are you going to be most effective? How are you going to get the attention of people who are making the decisions? It's also really important that you have a really strong base of support. So you need to connect with other individuals, with organizations. You can't do it on your own, especially if you're looking at a large scale policy change. You're going to need a lot of people on your side. The more people, the more successful you are going to be.